In 3, 2, 1, here we go. Give it a minute to see if people can get in.
Yeah, have the attendees up. Looking for Kevin.
All right, let's see if anybody else is going to join us. They're coming in. And then we'll get started. Okay.
All right, just want to get the Q&A window up there.
Yep. All right, let's get started. So how you feeling, Alex? I know you couldn't make it
feeling
2
better.
weeks ago. Feeling better. That's good to hear. So while you were gone, I went ahead and kind of did the meeting myself because you weren't around, and I kind of took the audience through some of the applications that we run on a day in and day out basis, like Actifile, Charisma. We talked about Breach Secure Now, Huntress Labs, all the different vendors that we kind of see on a regular basis and use on a regular basis to do our support of our program, but also kind of help the individuals that have these questionnaires answer their questions accordingly. So I know while you were out, we've had a couple more of these questionnaires come in. I know you had to fill out one for travelers for one of our clients, and I think you were going to talk about that one a little bit more in depth today. Was that correct?
Yeah.
Cool. So the one we got for this client, what did you see? And I know it's a newer one that we haven't, it's a newer version of the one we've been getting. What are some of the things you saw on it that might be interesting or are newer in this version than say the other ones?
I guess so. And this is something that I did see on the other one, and I always wonder if they have documentation referencing whether something is considered. So you see this first question here, indicate whether the applicant has, and the first one is up-to-date active firewall technology. So are there parameters for what is considered up-to-date? Does it have to be within 1 year of firmware? At what point are you considered out of date?
I guess it's a good question, and that would be something that I would probably, if I was unsure or didn't have a current UTM firewall, I would have to go back and ask the underwriter what exactly they mean, because some businesses use their Verizon or Comcast modem that comes along with the ISP stuff as their firewall. Is that sufficient enough? In my professional opinion, the answer is no. However, there could be other justifications behind it. What they're looking for typically, from what my understanding is a UTM firewall. Okay, that stands for Unified Threat Management. There's basically what we call stateful packet inspection. That's a feature of the SonicWalls, the FortiGates, the Cisco ASAs, where it's taking the information and actually scanning it for a specific set of rules that get applied. It's not just like giving out the internet to 20 computers and everybody can just go surf the net, okay? The key to a firewall is actually to protect your business, both externally and now even internally, from traffic leaving the network and also coming through it. So I'd have to go talk to the underwriter, but my guess would be they're looking for a UTM firewall. They're looking for the firmware to be probably, if not the latest, probably within a reasonable amount of time, I would think. So typically they come out every 2 to 3 months. So maybe you're 1 or 2 versions behind, but I would think within a year would probably be out of compliance. And then also that you have all the security services turned on. So that would be gateway antivirus, intrusion protection, IPS, IDS, content filtering. A lot of these do. If you want to use that, that's fine. So you can limit your users where they download and surf the internet from by category, but also it also has a database of like websites that are known to be compromised right now with ransomware or malware. So it'll flag those sites as not good.
Yeah.
You can also get into far as running applications. So you could say, hey, they can go to CBS Sports, but they can't do fantasy football. Okay. So my guess is, because that's where a lot of some of the vulnerabilities come in. But again, like your point, it's a very unknown question. It's very vague. Okay.
Yeah, so
Maybe
like they wouldn't send somebody out to verify. Do they have their own tech teams to do this type of stuff?
So the answer is no. I could literally write yes to every single checkbox on the questionnaire.
Yeah.
Okay. And they would turn around and give us coverage at a specific rate. If I checked yes to everything, they might ask a question or two, because that's pretty rare that you're going to get everything checked right away, but it's possible. I have a CPA buddy that explained this to me when it comes to doing tax returns. And I'm guessing it's kind of relates to the insurance side. Until there's an actual breach or there's a situation where a claim is filed and they ask for this information and you can't prove that you said yes, then there's a chance of a denial. So a CPA buddy of mine said, if you fill out a tax return fraudulently, but as long as it's not blatantly fraud, you took an extra deduction here, they're going to give you your refund. It won't be for 2 or 3 years until they start matching all the documents that they get versus the return to see if you actually have, I only have $1,000, you claimed $40,000, send me some backing, or they'll send an auditor out. Okay. But that doesn't happen right away unless it's blatant fraud. Then more than likely they're going to just honor whatever you put on the paper. And then down the road, they'll ask you to prove it. I'm assuming the insurance company will probably work the same way, where if you say yes, and then they determine that, yeah, you said you have this great firewall, but you're literally using a home Linksys, okay?
Yeah.
They probably will ding you or potentially deny your claim. I haven't personally heard or seen that yet, but again, this is changing so fast and it's so new. There isn't a whole lot of denials or claim precedent at that point yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of part of my next piece is, so this stuff is so new. Do you see the industry coming up with more refined guidelines? So like here we have, do you have a disaster recovery or a business continuity plan in place? Now we could say yes to that question. As far as, you know, a disaster recovery plan goes, are there any official stipulations that need to be put in place that can, you know, confirm that it's a viable disaster recovery plan? Are there going to be extra stipulations that say, well, this disaster recovery plan that you have in place is not effective enough?
Okay. I honestly don't know, and that's a phenomenal question. Because yes, there's disaster recovery plans that are written on one page, and there's disaster recovery plans that are a binder full. Okay. It's just like people's wills and estates. It's, hey, I wrote my will on a napkin when I was at the bar before I felt my heart going, versus I had a power of attorney and a legal team write up a full estate plan for me. Okay. And it's so new, and that's part of it. I guess in their eyes, something is better than nothing. And as long as there's you made a valiant effort, I guess they'll accept that. Okay. I mean, the things in it, like, so there's 3 pieces, or let's talk about the 2 pieces first. There's a DR plan, and then there's a continuity plan. Okay. A DR plan is a small portion of a continuity plan. Okay. Most small businesses don't have a continuity plan. Okay. Or if they do, it's very rudimentary, because it takes into consideration so many external factors and just requires a lot of time and due diligence to think about. Many, especially our clients, have DR plans, which focus on just one portion of the continuity, which is the tech side. Okay. So if we lost our servers, how do we recover? If we have to restore from backup, what do we do? And in those, there's two objectives, RPO and RTO, recovery point objective and recovery time objective. So every customer will say, hey, all right, I had a major crash. All right, the key application that I need up is X, and I need it up within X period of time. Okay, and we want to make sure that both are hit. However, there might be some ancillary stuff that's part of your DR plan, but might have a longer recovery time. Like I need my documents, I need my QuickBooks, but I don't need my invoicing program. Okay, we only invoice like 3 times a month, or if I have to wait an extra week to invoice, no big deal. But getting my email, my Word, and Outlook all open and working as fast as possible, that's more important to us than getting our invoices out. Okay, that's company A. Company B, that exact same conversation might be completely 180. They might say, hey, we live on invoicing. If we don't invoice, we don't get paid. We don't get paid. We don't have people. Forget about email and new business. We got to get our bills out. So they might say, let's get that application up first. That's more critical and has a higher recovery point objective and a recovery time objective than, hey, those old Word documents and spreadsheets that our accounting department uses, they can wait on them 24 extra hours. So the big thing is one, having some timeline of what your recovery looks like and what your objectives are. This is a DR plan, what I'm talking about. 2 would be who the key personnel are to handle that disaster. Okay. And I guess the definition of a disaster is relative to the customer. Okay. Some customers, their IT is very minor to their business, say a manufacturer or something to that extent where they're making something very hands-on. Yeah. The tech might be secondary to the welders and the machinists. As long as those machines can run, they're still producing business. The tech comes second. Where in other businesses, like a lawyer or a doctor, because of EHRs, that technology is kind of, they can't, even though the doctor's got his brain and can diagnose the illness, he can't prescribe medicine. He can't legally enter that medicine in because he didn't put it in a chart because their tech is down. So that's going to be a number 1 priority, okay, of getting that back up.
How do they determine, what your rate would be if there is a difference between, okay, you have the welder and you have the doctor, and how do you determine who is more reliant on the technology? I mean, how would they? The reason I asked this question is because it says in the past 3 years has the applicant experienced a network or system disruption. If your business is not as contingent on tech, I guess what I'm saying is the overall goal here is to get coverage. How is that coverage determined? Like, how do we come up with a good number?
Okay, so when they're talking about that, when they're talking about the disruption, they're more meaning a cyber event more than just a server crash. As long as they really don't care if your internet went down for 3 days because someone hit a telephone pole in front of Comcast. Yeah. Yes, you had business interruption, okay, but that's a whole different type of insurance. Your business owner's policy will probably cover that because just like our office, okay, if someone hit a telephone pole and the pole fell down in front of our front door and that was our only way in, and hypothetically we couldn't all work from home, okay, we would have business interruption to cover our expenses for that day and our payroll. But that's a different type of thing. They're more related from a technology side. They want to see if you had a breach, you've had a business email compromise, a wire fraud, something that money was paid out or there was a loss due to a technology issue. I don't think they care as much if you had an issue with, say, your server being down for a day or 2 and you had to have your IT guy fix it. But again, like you said, not clear, okay? There isn't, and that's part of why we're doing these talks, is because we're trying to show that these questions that they're using are not the cleanest. They're
They're
not,
pretty boilerplate, yeah.
they're boilerplate. The reason mainly is because they just want to see if you're doing something, I think,
Okay,
versus nothing. And they don't want to have too specifics, because if they do, then there's a certain level of either their liability or the customer's liability. And then it gets like, okay, so you said my DR plan was excellent, but then we had a problem with it. Why are you not covering me? They can't use that as an excuse then to say, oh, wait, your plan wasn't up to snuff. We can deny the claim. So there's a lot of gray, I think, on purpose, but I think they're looking forward to come back with your question is they're looking for, I think, objectives, personnel, and a timeline, and that it's tested. Okay. That's the big thing, is like, you can't just write a plan and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden just put it in a binder and never look at it until that disaster happens. They want you to regularly test it, or basically it's not really a DR plan. Okay.
Mhm.
I think if you encompass, even if it's like I said, one page, it's Alex. Okay. It's getting my email up within 24 hours because you're a small business. It's, hey, we're going to take down the email and we're going to make sure that we can restore it to a new laptop in 24 hours. And the key personnel are Justin and Alex, or whatever that would look like. Okay. As long as it's documented and vetted, they really can't, because of what they're asking for, deny it unless they ask and look at it, like you said, and then say, hey, this isn't cohesive enough. We need more info.
I see.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
And the same thing with the business continuity. Like that would include like where, if your building burnt down, where are your employees going to work the next day? Okay. Are they going to work from home? Are they
Yeah.
going to, do you have a temporary office? Can you rent WeWork space? Okay. How are you going to handle telephones? How are you going to handle email we might have, but like sending out letters, or if your customers visit you in an office because they got to drop stuff off. Okay. Where do they do that? So let's take that CPA firm, for example, one of our clients. If his building burns down, a lot of people pick up their returns, okay, drop off their returns. They don't use the technology, even though they have it. They might have to mandate like a share file, like, hey, our building burnt down, we're all working from home, you got to use share file. Or do they rent a temporary office? That would all be part of a business continuity on top of that. And most small businesses don't have one. Again, that I would say, if I was a small business working with us, I would lean towards more having the DR side plan done right. Having a rudimentary business continuity is probably something you would add. But like, yeah, to ask a business owner, hey, if this building burns down, where are you going to work? They're mostly going to say probably from home now.
Yeah.
But that's only a portion of it. Like I said, the logistics of how do they drop off the mail? The IRS mails letters to their, so now you have to have your mail forwarded, all that kind of stuff, because the IRS doesn't call or email, they only send letters. So, or you have to call them. So there's a little bit of that would have to go into place with a business continuity. But yes, it's very difficult for them to easily just knock on the door and be like, hey, here's your plan, I'm done. So yeah, I would, again, as these cases or as these breaches occur and these questionnaires get questioned, we'll start to see some more cases and some more case studies on what is true and what is false.
Cool. Now, this, I did have a question, and it's actually regarding a conversation I had with somebody yesterday,
Cool.
whether they were talking about Westlaw, which is now a cloud-hosted application. So if we're filling out this form, and I want to stick to specifically a certain portion of this form where it says you need multi-factor authentication and backup procedures, stuff like that. Is there a way for you to verify that if you're using a cloud-hosted platform versus a local hosted platform, is there a way to verify that that backup process is being taken, or do we just have to go on the word of the vendor and say, well, Westlaw says they follow these, this compliance? Are we, allowed to check that box off and say, hey, we at least got word that this cloud provider is doing this process?
So my answer to that is you got to take their word, yes, okay, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So if it comes to multi-factor, all right, are we using it? Okay, can it be done? So if the answer is
Yeah.
no, then we have to find another way to like limit access to that application. The big question is all right. So Westlaw, knowing that application, it's a resource or a library today for legal firms. Okay.
Yep.
Is there any data in there if a hacker or a bad actor got into it, okay, that they could get something that could be detrimental to that law firm? So
Yep.
are they storing cases in there? Okay. Or is it just a library, an online library of legal repository?
Where
Okay.
does the liability fall, regarding a breach of Westlaw itself, if it affects that person's clients, that office's clients?
Okay. So I guess there's a couple facts. So one would be is if Westlaw goes down, an insurance policy is not going to cover that. Okay. Most cases. If there's no PII or PHI, so if they get my password and they log into Westlaw, as long as there's no case information, it's just my login to research the library, there's really no risk there to the customer, okay? Or to our clients, because what are they really getting? Yes, they got their password breach. We can call and reset it, all of that stuff. But if they get in, they're just going to research, you know what I'm saying? A case from the 1970s about a car accident, or there's really nothing they can gain other than just legal precedent. Okay. That would cause an issue with your application. However, if there is case information, like clients are stored there, or you're saving articles about a specific case that has personal information, then that's a whole different story. Okay. But let's take a medical office, for example. A lot of medical use their EHR in the cloud. Then you have to fully vet them, okay? You can take their word if they're willing to do it, but you should ask the question, hey, send me your technical security documents. Send me your backup strategy. Ask them, a good question would be to ask them if they're ISO 27000 or 27001. That's an industry standard for IT firms and compliance. Are they HIPAA certified? Are they SOC? Do they have a SOC on their data center that's been an audit by an accounting firm? Do they have ask them what their policies and procedures are? And then the big one is also ask them what their limitation of liability is. So if they say yes, or they can't prove anything, all right, I hire you, you store all my medical records, but if you get breached and it's not our fault, it's your own or another customer that shares your data, because they all use these customers together and they're commingled to a certain extent. How much money can I collect if you're at breach? Because if my medical software company gets breached and all my clients get out and I have $1 million of risk, but they only have a limitation of liability of say 100,000, I'm on the hook for the other 900 grand because they limited themselves to not, so you have to be careful in what your limitations of liability are when you're dealing with cloud customers, because it's really important to better understand your risk. So that way you can fill that checkbox out. Oh, wait, you only have 100 grand, but I need $1 million. You either have to rewrite my contract or I need to see more information. Okay. I can't just go on the assumption that your word is the bond, because ultimately our customers don't know if we're sending data to third parties unless it's in a document when they join us. But even still, they're basically saying, hey, I'm entrusting you with my medical history. If you entrust that with someone else, I'm going to assume that you're taking the necessary precautions to handle that. So yes, it needs to be asked. The big question, like I said, is PII or PHI. That's really important to see if there's any risk. Like I said, if it's a simple application and there's nothing there, it's just a library or it's a resource and there's nothing they could really gain, then it's really a moot point.
Okay. Listen, I know you have a couple topics you want to touch on, and I don't want to compromise too much.
No, this is great. Keep on going.
So this says a process in place to regularly download and install patches, but it doesn't seem like there is a parameter as to what they consider regular. So what would you consider a regular interval for patching?
Okay. And this is one of those where, and I've said this on the first call, when you get these, put questions, add an appendix to the to your application saying, hey, 3A, we do the following. What does regular mean? Okay. I'm starting to see on some of the other apps, they're getting a little bit more, I guess they've been questioned a few times.
Yeah.
They're getting a little bit more specific with that. Okay. So we patch at TTR a typical 60-day window. So from the release, within 60 days, it hits your computer. Our goal is to try to usually get it within 30. We guarantee 60. We're redoing some of our processes to try to speed it up, but 30 days sometimes isn't even enough. It comes out on Patch Tuesday. So let's look at my calendar. So that would have been a week from, yeah, it'd been last Tuesday, the 10th. Okay. So that basically gives me till June 10th to push all the patches. I mean, by the time you can download them and try them and lab them, you're looking at a minimum of 2 weeks. So it gives you only 2 weeks to roll them out to everybody. Okay. It can be done, but sometimes it's a little cumbersome. You want to really vet the applications. You need to give the world some time to test it on different apps like QuickBooks, the common ones, Word, Excel. You don't want to push a patch and then have it break. I just read an article the other day that the May patch, one of them on certain type of domain controllers, breaks the user's local security policy and they can't log in. So literally, if you have a 300 person company, you're going to have 300 users yelling and screaming that they can't log in to the network unless they remove that patch. So Microsoft does a horrible job. So we want to make sure we wait. Again, some companies have development testing. They have a whole product life cycle because they run their own applications. Theirs might be longer. It needs to be spelled out what they consider regular, or you sell it to them. Hey, we patch all 0 days within 7 days. We patch, or 2 days. We patch all business critical updates and security within this. Fixes are done within 90 days. Do you accept this as regular? And let them come back to you versus you saying yes, and then they wanted 30 days. But I guess the advantage is it's arbitrary and their proof is against your, and you'd have the right, hey, look, you never defined what regular was. You didn't have an asterisk or sell me on it or a fill in the checkbox. Tell me what regular is for you. So again, this is one of the areas that we hate because we could tailor it. Hey, if they want 45, I think we could get away with that. Let's meet their compliance and set it to 45 days. Default 60. We need it done in 30 and that's a mandate. We'll do it in 30, but here are the risks to the customer and they have to accept those, that they could have bad patches because their insurance company wants them to patch regularly. Again, there's a lot of just hit or miss points and it's really annoying. Like I said, though, that I'm starting to see more detailed and defined timelines on that question because I think it's been questioned back more so than not.
Okay. Now, this question, it might get a little in the weeds because I'm a little unclear. So there's a question that says, is the applicant HIPAA compliant? And obviously, you know, that's the compliancy that has existed for all the medical companies that what I wonder is, let's say I have no computers in my office, or I have one computer, it doesn't even connect to the internet. Does that technically make me HIPAA compliant, or is it asking for the actual signed document of your HIPAA compliancy?
Okay, so great question. First off, obviously this only applies to medical. If it's not, you cross it out and you don't answer it, or you say
okay,
no.
So
and then
just leave that blank.
You just leave it blank because obviously, like if we were filling this out for TTR, I'm not HIPAA compliant. I mean, we're HIPAA compliant for our customers, but we're not storing medical records.
Yeah. So, well, when I say HIPAA compliant, are they asking? Because I know the goal of this is to check yeses on as many questions as possible. And while you may be, let's say we're HIPAA compliant in the way that we store our data, but we don't have a document saying we are HIPAA compliant, but our procedures may be. So yes. Is that what they're asking?
Okay, so obviously being an IT firm that represents medical, we're probably not a good example, okay?
Sure.
But let's take a small doctor's office, okay? What makes a doctor's office HIPAA compliant? It really depends, and the technology is actually the smallest part of HIPAA compliance, okay? There's people, and we have some colleagues that we can recommend that help get firms HIPAA compliant. Okay. What that means is like, for example, you can't leave a chart sitting on the front desk with a patient's medical history wide open and you go to lunch.
So it's a lot of
Okay.
procedural. Yeah.
It's very much procedural. Okay. When it comes to the tech, there's not a ton. It's how do you secure your EMR if it's not in the cloud? Okay. Do you have multi-factor on the applications? Like in Pennsylvania, if you're going to prescribe narcotics, you need to do a 2-factor code. Okay. In certain other states. So most of your software is going to validate the tech side for you of the HIPAA compliance part. So that's not usually a big deal. It's more policy management, making sure like if your EMR is on premise that the data is encrypted as rest. HIPAA is very, very vague, just like we're working with an SEC company. They just give you kind of these vague things and they're just asking, because if you follow HIPAA and you've done all your policies, you've probably checked a lot of these other boxes, and it just shows that you're taking consideration and security. Because if your EMR isn't encrypted and someone steals the server from your business, okay, and the data is not encrypted, then they can get access to those records and you technically wouldn't be HIPAA compliant, okay? But there's not like a straight up handbook that says there's some articles, there's some information, but there's not straight up a like, you must have this firewall, you must do this, you must do that to be HIPAA compliant. But 2/3 of it, for the customers that I've worked with that want to get that compliancy checkbox that show that it's more that you have the policies and procedures in place than that.
Okay. Speaking of encryption, so I know that right here they have a long list of the ways in which data can be encrypted, whether it's in transit or sitting data. But they don't have any parameter for what kind of encryption you need. So I know there's all kinds of, there's AES for your Wi-Fi, and then, there's SHA-256 for networks. And so even though you can technically be encrypted, what do you recommend? What kind of encryption? And will it suffice even if it's something that can typically be broken?
Okay, so for the encryption at rest, most cases, and it's kind of an industry standard at this point, is anything with a 256-bit cipher.
Okay.
256-bit cipher. Okay.
I know that's the only one that has not been absolutely broken.
Yes, because it's nearly impossible.
All hell will break loose if
yes.
So.
Okay. So literally it's going to sit there. I mean, that's more at rest. So like I said, if that server was taken out of your business, stolen, they broke through the front door, they kicked out your server room and they ripped it out.
Yeah.
That to get that data, you would have to have a 256-bit encryption key. That's nearly impossible to break. Okay. So unless you have that magic key. So that's most of it. When you're sending data in transit, that typically refers to email or a document portal. If it's got an HTTPS cert, that's usually pretty secure. If it's got an email like TLS 2.0, 2.1 or 3.0 is very secure. They're just saying, hey, are you when you're sending the data, it's just not being sent in plain text or stored in raw, that anybody could just take it and read it. Microsoft has a built-in thing for laptops called BitLocker. That would suffice. I don't think they really care about, like, as long as you're not using, like, take your analogy about the Wi-Fi, like you're not using WEP64 or WEP where it's like 6 characters anymore. Okay. As long as you're not using that, you're probably okay. Like I said, that's one that it's very difficult to mandate. Industry standard, like I said, for VPNs should all be AES 256 at this point, and it's almost pretty standard. It's been around so long.
Cool. I mean, I hit a lot of these. And I know you said you wanted to open up on the disaster recovery plan a bit.
Yeah. So one of the questions I'm seeing more and more on these is, which didn't even exist 2 years ago, is the defining of a CISO related to a incident response plan. So the application that you just got from that customer the other day, does it ask if you have an incident response plan?
Yes.
Or, okay,
Incident response plan is actually a different
question.
question, yeah, than your disaster recovery
Yep.
and business continuity.
So incident response is probably one of the hottest topics, and it seems like this is popping up on every application. If it wasn't before, it is now. Okay. So this is a different plan separate from your DR. It kind of works with DR to a certain extent and your business continuity. This is if and when a breach was to occur. Okay. And how you deal with that breach. Okay. So in this plan, there's basically the first thing is someone has to be named as a privacy officer or the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, someone with the ultimate responsibility of protecting your business. Okay.
Does it have to be an employee under, the employee of that firm, or could it be a third party?
It could be a third party.
Okay.
But they're the ones ultimately signing off. Okay.
Yeah.
On that the security is being maintained. Okay. And then within that is you're going to write up some different rules. Okay. You're going to, again, list the people involved. So it might be your IT team. You might have an HR person, maybe an accounting person, a bunch of different people. If something was ever to get triggered, okay, that those individuals might be asked upon to perform a certain task. Okay. Hey, and I'll get into that in a second. So the accounting person might have to review the books or pull a backup or whatever that case might be to verify, like, what was the last check number you wrote versus this check? Did these all clear? Like, you might have specific policies if you think the accounting system might have had a breach. Okay. So the first thing you have to define in an incident response plan is the difference between an incident and what we call an event.
Okay.
Okay. That is a big one. So we write all these policies like, where are we at here? Okay. So where's my notes? So you write like a acceptable use policy. You have your BYOD policies. You have all these different policies, code of conduct policies, confidentiality policies, all these policies that you kind of write within your business that say you're going to do certain things, change your passwords, do all that. Okay. If one of those policies, maybe not breach, but has a trigger hit. Okay. So you've say that, hey, if X number of times a IP address hits our firewall, okay, which happens, okay, we're going to look into it if the IDS and IPS doesn't do their job. Okay. That would trigger an event, okay, of your incident response plan. You're not breached, nothing got in. It's you need to go look at it. Okay. So you would log into your firewall logs because you'd have a trigger software that would monitor that. Okay. Or a SIM event, as we call it. And you would go have a physical pair of eyes, go look at what happened. Oh, it seems like some bot. Okay, I'm going to block that IP or I'm going to filter that country. You would mark it down on like you'd have a form that you would fill out that basically said event was triggered of your incident response plan. You would file it close it, just like we close a ticket. You would file it, put it in a binder. Okay, nothing would happen. Okay, and you move on with your day. And again, you're going to get a lot of noise when you're doing this kind of stuff. 28 out of 30 don't even go to that next step. Okay, it's just, hey, it's this. Oh, we have a procedure for that. Block. Okay, we're done. Move on. Nothing ever happened. They just scan their IP too many times, or this country is trying to break in, but we can just block their IP or whatever. No system was ever compromised or threatened, I guess is okay. The next part, after you have an event, an event could turn into an incident. Okay.
Okay.
So so let's say you look at those firewall logs that we just talked about, and that event, it keeps on happening, or even after you block it, or they find another IP that's very similar. You're like, something's weird here. It's not just some random occurrence. This seems more patternized. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you're going to turn that into an incident. Okay.
Okay.
So now you're
Does
going
a
to bring
physical
in,
breach, or I guess a network breach, need to happen for you to consider an incident, or does it just have to be a repeated event that appears to be, coordinated?
okay. So there's different tiered event incidents.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, you define what you and your team as a CISO and your security team are going to define these. There's not like, oh, this is what, okay. Hey, we want to make sure that our firewall, because we have a lot of medical data and we're Children's Hospital, we want to look at every blip on the radar. We don't want one, because we have so much data. We don't want anything to even, okay. So you say, hey, we blocked IP 12.12.12.12, okay, today, and you're good. And then tomorrow you're starting to see 12.12.12.13. You block that one. Then the next day you get a 1.4. So if you have a rule that says 3 IPs in the same subnet having an attack on our firewall triggers an incident. Okay. That event, like 3 events of the same like equal an incident. Now you have to not just book it, you got to look deeper into it. Okay. Who owns those IPs? Where are they coming from? Why are they looking at us? Do we have is there a breach somewhere? You're going to put a little bit more effort. Okay. Because some of these your staff might not even know about. If someone trying to do something with a firewall or whatever, okay, that might trigger this incident that you got to investigate further. Okay. And what that incident looks like is really up to you. Okay. And what that entails from your perspective. Doesn't mean there's a breach, doesn't mean just, hey, it's now more just an event. It's an incident because there's some pattern that we developed and we need to take more consideration into that event or events. If something, now, back to your point, something could instantly be like, hey, I clicked on a phishing email and I bought this and they got my password and they might have our credit card, okay? That instantly becomes a incident. It skips the event because someone came and told you, and you have a policy and procedure. Okay, call the accounting department, get that credit card canceled immediately. We're going to put credit monitoring on your social because I guess it's tied to your social. Whatever that protocol is, okay, you're going to monitor that incident, and it could be turned into be nothing. Okay, yeah. You did all your procedures, and you kind of tightened up the hatches a little bit, and you just monitor and maintain it. Okay. Or it could be, hey, I clicked this, and then you come in Monday morning and ransomware hit the whole network. Okay. That's a big incident, obviously. Okay. Yeah. And you're going to have a plan on that. So, okay, we got to find who patient 0 is, as we call it in our office. Okay. Get it off, get it in a sandbox, review the entire network. So there's usually 5 steps to an incident response. When you're doing a rip out, you got to get rid of the actual exposure, or you have to investigate. But there's kind of areas when you write these plans that kind of go into it. So you develop your scope, you develop your what we call preparation. So what you're going to prepare for the event, how to communicate, who are your teams, okay? What are you going to use to detect those pieces? Like I said, with the firewall, that, okay? If a breach was to occur, or that person with the credit card comes to you, who's going to go investigate it? Is it the CISO himself? Do you have a security team admin or a incident response team that's going to go in, that's going to look at that from your IT? They've been trained. Almost like, think of it in the police department. A SWAT officer was at one point a regular police officer. He went back to additional training to become a SWAT officer. Maybe you send a guy or two, or your third part, to incident response training, how to handle and how to find that patient that is the one spamming out the virus or whatever. Okay. How do you remediate it? How do you, or slash, exterminate that problem? Okay. How do you remediate that problem? And then how do you, as fast as possible, and then how do you recover from that problem? Okay. They're kind of the steps that you take when you have an incident. Now, again, you might be able to blow through 1, 2, 3, 4, like real quick if it's something minor. Okay. But your remediation step and your investigation step, if it's a ransomware, might be much longer in that incident versus a minor event. But these are things that need to be planned out and planned on what is an event, what is an incident, what's a super incident, and then what leads into potentially a disaster. So your disaster recovery plan usually gets modified once you make this, because if you say, hey, we have to restore from backup, if we get a ransomware, we know how to stop it or limit it, but we might have to restore our data, and that could lead to additional downtime. Okay. What is our policies for the disaster recovery piece? And what is our procedures in that plan? Like, all right, we said in our DR, if any data greater than 10 gig has to be restored, these steps have to be followed. Well, we just had a ransomware attack. So now we're greater than 10 gig. So that triggers these other events. Okay. And that all has to be thought out in an incident response plan. These are the hottest things because our hope is, and that's what the insurance company's hope is that your detection software and containment, if you have these layers in place, like ThreatLocker, Huntress, all these vendors, that it never gets to that point where it runs amok. You have the ability to contain it, limit it to a couple computers, the ability to, oh, it's on this port at this company, you have a SOC monitoring it. They're instantly going to take that switch port that's throwing that alarm and disable it. Okay. Take it off the network or put it on a VLAN that's isolated, that strictly has no internet access, and that can't do anything until someone can then go investigate it with their physical eyes. Okay. That's what they're looking for in those plans, because if you have one, the likelihood of that whole ransomware going, as I call it, the muck, running through your entire network is a lot less likely. Okay. So, but I'm seeing more and more of that, and very, very few, even of our clients, we're starting to build them for the cyber clients that opt into our full programs, but very few small businesses, even mid-sized businesses, probably have one of these documents because they're so brand new. And I'm starting to see, it used to be, hey, you get a bonus point if you have one. Now it's almost it's a true, like you said in that question, yes or no. And if you say yes, that's really going to help your cause, because they know if something was to occur, which unfortunately can happen, systems can fail, that you have enough in place to keep it from going through the entire office and turning a $20,000 claim into a $2 million claim.
Yeah. And I guess, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. No. It's just so the range of your claim can depend on how long you're out, and how much money the client is losing based on the fact that there was an incident, right, or a breach of some sort. And I see they have, and it must be that the insurance companies are getting hit harder due to the fact that security protocols are not in place. Is why they come up with this underwriting. But I don't see much in the way of hardware continuity. So let's say, are there any discounts that can be given or check boxes that we, can we say that we are less likely to have hardware failure or downtime due to hardware failure because we have battery backups on our servers? That
has nothing to do with cyber. That would fall under your general business plan, which most cases they don't care. That's your own. I mean, that falls under business interruption under a non-cyber plan. The only time the business interruption would kick in a cyber plan is if it's related to an incident response related to a cyber attack.
Gotcha.
Okay. Your own negligence, if you have a 12-year-old server, okay, that depends on your insurance carrier and your insurance broker on how that's written. So like, hey, you didn't replace your hardware and you're down and you lost business because of it. That might be covered. It might not be, because you just say you should know that you can't keep tech for 12 years and
Yeah.
run critical stuff and have to restore from backup. That's your own cost of doing business.
So it's a completely separate policy.
That falls under your general business stuff, just like our building and our lights and for fire, that falls under that. Cyber literally has to do with the technology of someone either defrauding you and taking money, or someone compromising your system and preventing you from using it. So
Gotcha.
ransomware, someone does a wire fraud. Yes, if you just, like even years ago, before cyber incidents, if you didn't update your server and you didn't listen to your IT department and it crashed and you were down for 3 days, that's not the insurance company's fault. That's you're not having good business process.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, act of God, like your server crashed because of a lightning storm, that's different. Okay. But yeah, if the thing just crashed because someone installed a bad patch or didn't do an update, or it just failed because of hardware, that's probably not you might get some coverage depending on what kind of like addendums you have in your business interruption, but more than likely they're just going to say that's your own fault.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I was just something I was confused on.
Okay, good. That's the whole point of this, is because you're
Yeah.
not the only one. I get confused, you get confused, and we live and breathe this. We know insurance agents are getting confused. I have sometimes the underwriters are probably getting confused and need to bring in experts. So
Yeah.
that's why I say it's so important. If you're unsure, or if you have to say yes or no, I don't like those answers. I like boxes where I can fill in and sell my story, because like I said in previous calls, and then we'll wrap here because we're coming up on time.
Yep.
What do you call it? Like there's yes or no, right? So yes, I do multi-factor, but it's not on one minor application because it just doesn't make sense to. It's going to be too costly. So you're telling me but I don't have it on because they rate every critical application. So I have to say no there, but you're telling me I'm just as at fault that the guy who has nothing, but I have it 99% of the way. I'm working on that last application. So
Yeah.
no, I want to write C addendum 1, say, yes, it's on critical EHR program. It's on my email. It's on this. It's on this. We are working towards this last. So when someone reads that, it's like, okay, they obviously take it seriously and they're working towards making it 100%. But you're telling me I'm just as likely to have that breach as the guy who has none of his applications. So that's where I kind of argue back with underwriters. I ask for phone calls. We have those chats because I want to start that conversation, because at the ultimate day, they're just getting pulled in. Our clients or our potential colleague, they're getting pulled in with everybody else. And it's really not fair, because you're comparing apples to oranges versus apples to apples.
Yeah.
So, but great talk today. I think we covered a lot of good topics.
It definitely made me more clear as to
yes.
a lot.
And that's the whole point of these conversations, is because we're seeing these, we're answering them, you're answering them. The whole point of these is to inform and educate, because there is no right answer. And
that's
trying
also
to
a lot of what I'm finding is there is a lot of the time no right answer. When they say critical systems, there is no parameter for what they consider critical or not. And so it's just about them gauging their ability to insure somebody with a certain amount of guarantee that they won't get breached.
Correct.
And, yeah, so I mean, I could see these things becoming more and more complicated over time because we have these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know.
Oh, they're going to evolve. And we've seen the evolvement. I mean,
yeah.
Where they were last year, where they were earlier this year versus where they'll be next year.
Yeah.
I read an article. I wish I had it. Let me see if I can find it. Art Gross, who runs Breach Secure Now, posted something about the issue next year, or by 2025, I think it's going to be a 25 trillion industry, something like that. It's where they're heading. Yeah, I can't find it off the top of my head, but literally it's like, this isn't going away. And if anything, it's growing in revenue.
Yeah.
Okay. It's going to hit over, like you said, it's going to be, I think he said 25 trillion by 2025. So it's got a ridiculous cap, and they're getting smarter and harder as we develop more technology and more systems. So we got to really put our guard up, and that's what the insurance companies are trying to teach us, just like they did with the automotive. Is, hey, you got to wear a seatbelt now. Okay, it's proven
Yeah.
that saves your life. So the same thing, if you do these policies and you do these procedures and you check these boxes, will you still potentially get breached? Absolutely. Okay. Will it be a minimized issue? More than likely.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy to think. I mean, we're so integrated with all this technology all the time, but we're just now leaving the wild west of this stuff. And it's going to just ever evolve. And I can't wait to see it.
Okay. And so I want to thank everybody for their time today and watching and talking with Alex and I, and we'll catch up with you in 2 weeks. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.